My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 68 years old, and my own son tried to throw me out of my home. Before I tell you how I sold his supposed inheritance right out from under him and escaped to my California oceanfront dream, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I stood there on the porch, my hand shaking just slightly as I held up my phone. The picture on the screen was crystal clear. A bright red sign with the word sold staked firmly into the front lawn. My lawn. From inside the house, a roar of pure rage erupted, a sound I hadn't heard from my son Kevin since he was a teenager. What did you do? You sold my house. His voice was followed by a theatrical sob from my daughter-in-law, Brittany, but through the window, I could see the raw panic in her eyes. Oh, they thought they had me. They thought they had won. They had no idea that this chess match was over, and I had just delivered the checkmate. It wasn't always like this. Not even close. For over 30 years, this house in the quiet suburbs of Cleveland was my sanctuary. It's where my husband, David, and I built a life, where we painted walls, planted roses, and watched our only son grow. The pencil marks charting Kevin's height are still there, hidden on the kitchen door frame. After David's funeral 5 years ago, the silence in these rooms was deafening. The space felt impossibly large, but it was my home. It was all I had left of him. That is, until 18 months ago when Kevin and Brittany moved in. It's just temporary, Mom, Kevin had assured me, his arm around Brittany's shoulder. Just until we save up for a down payment on our dream home. The housing market is brutal. I believed him. Of course I did. He was my son. I made them dinner every night, did their laundry, and asked for nothing in return. I was just so happy not to be alone. But the cracks started to show almost immediately. I remember the first Saturday they were here. I walked into the living room, which also served as my sewing room, and found Brittany standing in the middle of it, a look of disgust on her face. She tossed her $1,000 handbag onto David's favorite armchair, a piece he'd lovingly reupholstered himself. "Oh, Ellie," she sighed, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. "We are going to have to do something about all this vintage clutter." The way she said my name, Ellie, not Mom, felt like a tiny shard of glass lodging itself in my heart. She circled the room, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my things. My sewing machine, my baskets of yarn, the quilt I was making for a local charity auction. "This can all go in the basement, right? We need this room for a proper home office. Kevin has his career to think about." I just stood there speechless. Before I could even process what was happening, Kevin walked in. "Honey, don't you think you should ask Mom first?" he said, but there was no force behind his words. Brittany just laughed, a sharp tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Don't be silly, Kev. Ellie wants us to be comfortable. Right, Ellie?" She didn't wait for an answer. That afternoon, my sewing room, my little corner of the world, was dismantled and shoved into the damp, dark basement. That was the first of many paper cuts. My cooking was too old-fashioned. My taste in furniture was depressing. She'd reorganized the kitchen while I was out, hiding my favorite mugs and replacing them with minimalist white cups that felt cold and foreign in my hands. Kevin saw it all, but he never said a word. He'd just give me a helpless shrug when Brittany wasn't looking, as if to say, "What can I do?" I tried to tell myself it was just the stress of living together. I tried to believe they were good kids who were just a little thoughtless. I kept making excuses for them, for my son. I kept telling myself that underneath it all, he still loved and respected the mother who had raised him. But that was just the beginning. I had no idea that their plan was much crueler than just getting rid of a few old things. The next few days passed in a tense, suffocating quiet. I cooked, I cleaned, I moved through the motions of my life, but a cold knot of dread had taken root in my stomach. Brittany was cloyingly sweet, calling me Ellie, in a way that felt like an insult, while Kevin avoided my eyes altogether. He knew what was coming. The confrontation, when it finally happened, was meticulously planned. Brittany waited until Kevin had left for a golf outing on a Wednesday morning. She found me in the kitchen where I was polishing the silver, a task I always found calming. She pulled up a chair at my kitchen table, the one David had built for me, and folded her hands, a picture of serene concern. Her perfectly manicured nails, the color of dried blood, tapped a restless rhythm on the polished oak. "Ellie," she began, her voice a soft, syrupy purr. "Kevin and I, we've been talking. And we're just so worried about you. I stopped polishing, the cloth still in my hand. I didn't say anything. I just waited. This house, she gestured around the room with a delicate wave of her hand. It's just so much for one person. The upkeep, the stairs. At your age, you should be relaxing, enjoying your golden years, not worrying about leaky faucets and mowing the lawn. At your age. The phrase landed like a slap. I was 68, not 98. I walked 3 miles every morning. I volunteered at the library twice a week. I could still climb a ladder to clean the gutters better than her husband could. We've been doing some research, she continued, pulling a glossy brochure from her purse and sliding it across the table. The cover showed a group of smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard. The name on top read Sunset Meadows. My blood ran cold. And what is this? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. It's a wonderful retirement community, Ellie. It's more like a resort, really. They have organized activities, community dining, excursions, and, most importantly, 24/7 medical staff on site. It would give us such peace of mind to know you're safe and cared for. I stared at her, at this stranger sitting in my kitchen, planning the end of my life as if she were booking a vacation. She saw my home, my life's work, as a burden. She saw me as a problem to be managed, an inconvenience to be neatly filed away. That evening, Kevin came home. I was quiet through dinner, the Sunset Meadows brochure lying on the counter like a coiled snake. After we ate, while Brittany was upstairs on the phone, I finally confronted him. Your wife thinks I should be put in a home, I said, my voice flat. He had the grace to look uncomfortable, shuffling his feet like a boy caught stealing cookies. Mom, it's not like that. We're just thinking about what's best for you. What's best for me? I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Or what's most convenient for you? He sighed, the sound of a man burdened by a difficult task. He walked over and picked up the brochure. Look, Mom. The house is getting to be too much. And this is my inheritance. Legally, since you signed the papers after Dad's funeral, this is my house now. It's time for us to start our lives, to have our own space. He said it. He actually said it. The unspoken truth that had been hanging in the air for months. This wasn't my home anymore. I was a tenant, an obstacle. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, not comforting. We're giving you until the end of next month. That's more than fair. Find a place. We'll even help you move. He called it a decision, but his tone was an ultimatum. He wasn't asking, he was telling. My own son was evicting me. And as I looked into my own son's cold, distant eyes, I realized the mother he knew had died in that kitchen. A few days later was Sunday, the day my dear Aunt Carol always came over for dinner. She was my late husband's sister, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had always been my staunchest ally. I thought about canceling, about hiding my shame, but a stubborn part of me refused to be cowed in my own home. I would act normal. I would pretend my world wasn't crumbling around me. The air during dinner was thick with unspoken tension. I served the pot roast, David's favorite recipe, and tried to steer the conversation toward safe topics, the weather, Aunt Carol's garden, the latest book I was reading. Kevin was sullen, barely speaking, while Brittany was a whirlwind of false cheerfulness. She complimented my cooking, asked Carol about her grandchildren, and played the part of the devoted daughter-in-law to perfection. I almost fell for it myself. The mask slipped during dessert. I had just placed a slice of my homemade apple pie in front of Aunt Carol when Brittany let out a tinkling little laugh. You know, Carol, she said, leaning forward conspiratorially, we're trying so hard to convince Ellie to upgrade her living situation. Find a place that's a bit more modern. Aunt Carol raised an eyebrow. Modern? What's wrong with this place? David and Eleanor built a beautiful home here. Oh, it's lovely, Brittany chirped, waving her fork dismissively. But it's not practical for her anymore. We found this amazing community, Sunset Meadows. They have high-speed Wi-Fi so she can video call us whenever she wants, which is so important. And there are nurses on staff, just in case she gets a little forgetful with her medication or has a fall. The room went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. She had just painted a picture of me as a frail, senile old woman, incapable of caring for herself, right in front of my family. It was a calculated, public humiliation. My hands trembled as I gripped the edge of the table. I looked across the table at Kevin, my eyes pleading with him. Say something. Defend me. Tell her she's wrong. This was his moment to be a son. He didn't. He just stared down at his plate, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on the china. He took a slow, deliberate bite of his pie, chewing as if nothing had happened. His silence was a betrayal far deeper than Brittany's cruel words. It was an endorsement. He was letting her do the dirty work, letting her dismantle my dignity piece by piece while he stood by and watched. Aunt Carol, bless her heart, was not so easily fooled. She placed her fork down with a quiet clink and fixed Brittany with a stare that could freeze fire. My sister-in-law, she said, her voice like ice, has a mind sharper than the two of you combined, and the only thing she's in danger of falling from is the shock of her own son's ingratitude. Brittany's smile faltered. She shot a panicked look at Kevin, who still refused to look up. The rest of the dinner was a painful, awkward affair. Aunt Carol left early, squeezing my hand at the door and whispering, "You call me if you need anything. Anything at all." I didn't cry that night. I was beyond tears. The hurt had burned itself out, leaving behind something cold and hard and clear. They hadn't just insulted me. They had tried to strip me of my identity in front of the people I loved. They wanted me to be small so they could feel big. They wanted me to be weak so they could justify their own cruelty. As I lay in bed, staring into the darkness, I could hear them whispering in the next room. Not arguing but plotting. Their voices were low and conspiratorial. They thought they had won the battle. They thought they had broken me. But a fire was starting to burn in the ashes of my humiliation. A fire that would consume their comfortable little world. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The fog of grief and denial had lifted, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. My first priority was to secure my finances. I knew from the papers David had left that we had a substantial nest egg, money I had barely touched since his passing. My plan was simple. Transfer a large portion of it from our old joint savings account into a new, separate account under my name only. It was the first step toward independence. I sat down at the small desk in my bedroom, opened my laptop and navigated to my bank's website. I logged in, my fingers feeling steady and sure. I found the transfer funds page, entered the details, the amount, the new account number, and clicked Submit. A red error message flashed on the screen. Transaction exceeds daily limit. I frowned. That was odd. I tried again with a smaller amount. The same message appeared. I navigated to my account settings and my stomach dropped. A daily transfer limit of $500 had been placed on my account. I hadn't done that. I would never have done that. Then a memory surfaced, hazy at first, then sharp and sickeningly clear. About 6 months ago, Brittany had sat right here beside me, helping me set up my online banking profile. "It's so much more convenient, Ellie," she chirped. "And we should add some extra security features just to be safe. You can never be too careful these days." I, trusting and naive, had let her guide me through the process, clicking where she told me to click, not paying close enough attention. My heart began to pound. I scrolled further down the settings page. Notification preferences. All account alerts, large withdrawals, security changes, login attempts, were being sent via text message. To a phone number that wasn't mine. I recognized the last 4 digits. They belonged to Brittany. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just a casual security setting. This was a deliberate, calculated act. She had systematically locked me out of my own money. She had built a digital cage around me, and I had handed her the key. Every time I used my debit card for groceries, every small check I wrote, she would have been notified. She was monitoring me, controlling me. I picked up my phone, my hand trembling with a rage so profound it felt like it would shake me apart. I called the bank's customer service line. After 20 minutes on hold, a cheerful young man answered. I explained the situation, my voice tight. "Yes, Mrs. Vance," he said after looking up my account. "I can see the $500 daily limit was put in place on March 14th, and the notification number was also changed on that date. We would have sent a confirmation email to the address on file." My email. Quickly logged in. I searched for March 14th. Nothing. I checked my trash folder. And there it was. An email from the bank confirming the changes. An email I had never seen. And then I saw why. A filter had been set up. Any email from the bank's official address was automatically marked as read and moved to the trash. Brittany hadn't just changed the settings, she had covered her tracks. I hung up the phone, the cheerful young man's voice still echoing in my ear. It felt like the walls were closing in. This went far beyond wanting me out of the house. This was about control. They wanted to render me helpless, financially dependent, a child who needed her allowance doled out. They wanted to make it impossible for me to fight back, impossible for me to leave on my own terms. They hadn't just asked me to leave. They had built a cage. And they just locked the door. Before I tell you how I broke out of that digital prison and found an ally I never expected, I want to say this. If my story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt trapped or underestimated, please stick with me, because the comeback is always stronger than the setback. For a moment, I let the panic wash over me. The feeling of being utterly trapped, manipulated by the two people I should have been able to trust most in the world. But then the fire I'd felt after Aunt Carol's visit roared back to life, burning away the fear and leaving only ice-cold fury. They thought they had me cornered. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I didn't bother trying to fix things online. I knew Brittany would get an alert the moment I tried. Instead, I did something they never would have expected. I got up, walked to my closet, and put on my navy blue suit, the one I always wore to important meetings with David. I put on my pearls. I did my hair and makeup not for them but for me. I was not a victim. I was a woman preparing for battle. I walked out of the house without a word, got in my car, and drove directly to the main branch of my bank downtown. I bypassed the tellers and asked to speak directly with the branch manager, a woman named Mrs. Peterson whom I had met a few times over the years. I was shown into her office. I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, and calmly, methodically, laid out the entire situation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I presented the facts. The unauthorized limit, the changed phone number, the email filter. I showed her my driver's license, my passport, my social security card. I was the owner of that account and I was being held hostage. Mrs. Peterson's professional smile slowly faded, replaced by an expression of grim understanding. She listened intently, her fingers steepled under her chin. When I was finished, she looked at me for a long moment. "Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice firm, "this is a serious matter. This is a form of elder financial abuse." The word hung in the air between us. Abuse. I hadn't let myself call it that, but she was right. "We are going to fix this. Right now," she declared. For the next 30 minutes, Mrs. Peterson worked with a furious efficiency. She removed the transfer limit. She removed Brittany's phone number and replaced it with my own. She helped me reset all my passwords and security questions. She showed me how to remove the email filter. Then she did something more. She flagged the account with a special note. Verbal confirmation with client Eleanor Vance required for all security changes. No exceptions. I walked out of that bank feeling 10 feet tall. I had taken back control. As I drove, I wasn't ready to go home yet. The thought of facing their cloying, false concern made my skin crawl. On impulse, I drove to the public library, a place that had always been my refuge. I sat down at a computer terminal, the quiet hum of the library a soothing balm. I wasn't there to check out books. I opened the web browser, and my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I thought about typing retirement homes near me, just to see what my prison would have looked like. But I deleted the words. Instead, I typed, "Real estate market, Carmel by the Sea, California." It was a place David and I had dreamed of retiring to one day. A place of rugged coastlines, cypress trees, and endless blue ocean. A fantasy. But as I looked at the listings, at the charming cottages and sun-drenched condos, it didn't feel like a fantasy anymore. Felt like a possibility. That night, after a tense, silent dinner, I went to my bedroom. I pulled out a heavy locked metal box from the back of my closet. It was David's. It held all our most important documents. I hadn't opened it in years. My hands trembled as I turned the key. Inside were life insurance policies, stock certificates, deeds, and investment portfolio statements. I spread them out on my bed. I had always let David handle the finances. He enjoyed it, and I trusted him completely. I knew we were comfortable, but I had never truly understood the full extent of his careful planning. I added up the numbers, my heart pounding with every new figure. When I finally got to the bottom line, I had to sit down. I stared at the final number on my notepad, my breath catching in my throat. $2.5 million. Kevin and Brittany were fighting over a house they thought was $1 million inheritance. They had no idea it was just the tip of the iceberg. They thought they held all the cards. They didn't even know what game they were playing. The number on that notepad changed everything. It wasn't just money. It was power. It was freedom. But I knew I couldn't navigate the next steps alone. They had lawyers. Brittany had bragged about her father being a partner at a big firm downtown. I needed my own champion. Aunt Carol came through. When I called and told her a carefully edited version of what was happening, focusing on my desire to downsize and their overbearing help, she didn't hesitate. "You need to talk to Arthur Davies," she said immediately. He was David's estate lawyer for years. He's old school, tough as nails, and he doesn't suffer fools gladly. The next day, I was sitting in Mr. Davies's office. It was exactly as I'd pictured it. Dark wood, shelves overflowing with leather-bound books, and a faint smell of paper and pipe tobacco. Mr. Davies himself was a man in his late 70s with piercing blue eyes and a handshake like a vice grip. I laid out the whole story, leaving nothing out this time. The move-in, the constant belittling, the incident with Aunt Carol, the digital cage Brittany had built, and finally the document I'd signed just weeks after David's death, the one that supposedly made the house Kevin's. I slid the copy across his large mahogany desk. He put on a pair of reading glasses and studied the document in silence. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. Felt like an eternity. He read it once, then read it again, his brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, he took off his glasses and looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rumble. "When you signed this, were you represented by your own legal counsel?" "No," I whispered. I wasn't thinking straight. Kevin said it was just a formality to make things easier with the estate and taxes. I trusted him. "And he was with you when you signed it?" "Along with his own lawyer." I nodded, the memory making me feel sick. A slow, grim smile spread across Mr. Davies's face. Then he made a very, very big mistake. He leaned forward, his eyes glinting. In the state of Ohio, there's a legal principle called undue influence. It applies when one party takes advantage of another's position of vulnerability to influence their decision-making. You were a grieving widow. He was your only son. He brought you to his lawyer to sign a complex legal document that transferred your primary asset to him. That, Eleanor, is the textbook definition of undue influence. I felt a surge of hope so powerful it almost made me dizzy. "But that's not even the best part," he continued, tapping the document with his finger. He was sloppy. "The language here states the transfer is for the purpose of estate planning and to simplify the eventual inheritance. It doesn't explicitly state it's an irrevocable gift. It's ambiguous. And in law, ambiguity is a weapon." He leaned back in his chair, the old leather groaning in protest. "What this means is that you, as the original owner who is still very much alive and in need of securing your own future, have a powerful legal argument that you have every right to sell this property to fund your living expenses. Especially," he added with a sharp look, "if your current living situation has become untenable." "So I can sell it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "With my help, you can sell it, and there's not a damn thing he can do about it that won't end with him being deeply embarrassed in a court of law." He and his clever wife thought they were playing checkers. Mr. Davies let out a dry chuckle. "But we, my dear Eleanor, are about to play chess." I walked out of that office feeling like I could breathe again. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months was gone. I wasn't just a grieving widow or an inconvenient mother anymore. I was a woman with a $2.5 million war chest and a bulldog of a lawyer on her side. The game had changed. The plan Mr. Davies and I devised was one of absolute secrecy. The element of surprise was our greatest weapon. "Let them think they're winning," he'd advised. "The more comfortable they get, the harder they'll fall." The very next day, I contacted the top real estate agent in our area, a woman named Sarah who was known for her discretion and quick sales. I met her at a coffee shop miles from our neighborhood. I explained that I was selling due to a family situation and that the sale needed to be handled with the utmost confidentiality. No for sale sign on the lawn. Private showings only, scheduled exclusively when I knew Kevin and Brittany would be out of the house. Sarah, a consummate professional, didn't blink an eye. "I understand completely," she said, her expression sympathetic but all business. "In this market, a well-maintained home in your neighborhood won't last a week." She was right. The house, which I had lovingly cared for over 3 decades, was in pristine condition. The first showing was a young doctor and his wife. The second was a couple relocating for a corporate job. Within 3 days we had 3 solid offers, all over the asking price. I accepted an all-cash offer from the second couple. It was $20,000 above list price, and best of all, they were pre-approved and wanted to close in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. It was perfect. The timeline was aggressive, but it was exactly what I needed. Meanwhile, at home I was playing the role of my life. I became the meek, compliant mother they wanted me to be. When Brittany would leave brochures for Sunset Meadows on the kitchen table, I would thank her sweetly. "These look lovely, dear," I'd say. "I'm just so overwhelmed with the decision. I need a little more time to think." Her frustration was visible, but she tried to mask it with that fake, saccharine smile. "Of course, Ellie. Take all the time you need. We just want what's best for you." Kevin, seeing my apparent cooperation, started to relax. He became almost friendly again, telling me about his day at work, asking my opinion on things. One evening he found me in the living room looking out the window. He put a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is hard, Mom," he said, his voice full of phony sincerity, "but you're doing the right thing. This will be a fresh start for all of us." I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. "I know, honey," I said, patting his hand. "Change is good." Behind their backs, my life was a whirlwind of secret activity. I had phone calls with Mr. Davies, reviewing the closing documents. I had hushed conversations with Sarah, the realtor, coordinating the home inspection and appraisal. I spent hours online, not looking at retirement homes in Ohio, but at sun-drenched apartments in Carmel by the Sea. I found it on the 3rd day of looking. A beautiful 2-bedroom condo on a cliffside street, with a wide balcony overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was modern but warm, with a gourmet kitchen and a fireplace. I took a virtual tour and knew instantly. This was it. This was my new home. I contacted the property manager, filled out the application, and using the funds I now had full control over, wired the security deposit and first month's rent. Everything was falling into place. One night, Kevin came home beaming. He just closed a big deal at work. "We should go out to celebrate," he announced. My treat. We went to their favorite upscale steakhouse. Over dinner, he and Brittany talked excitedly about their future. They talked about the renovations they wanted to do to the house, once Mom is settled. They planned a trip to Europe for the following year. They were spending my money, my future, before I was even gone. As I sat there sipping my wine and nodding along, I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. Kevin raised his glass. "To the future," he said, looking from me to Brittany. "A bright future for the Vance family." I raised my glass to meet his. "To the future," I echoed, a small secret smile playing on my lips. He had no idea how right he was. The future was indeed bright. Just not for him. The perfect opportunity presented itself the following Tuesday. Brittany came downstairs dressed in designer athleisure wear, her face glowing. "Guess what?" she sang, pouring herself a green smoothie. "My company is sending me to a leadership retreat in Scottsdale for the long weekend. And they said I could bring a +1. Kevin's face lit up. "Seriously? That's amazing, babe." "I know, right?" she said. "We leave Thursday afternoon and come back Sunday night. A little mini vacation. It'll be a great chance for us to recharge. And for Ellie to have some quiet time to think about her options." She gave me a pointed, sugary smile. It was more than an opportunity. It was a gift from the universe. For whole days. More than enough time to execute the final phase of my plan. "That sounds wonderful, dear," I said, my voice full of warmth. "You too have fun. You deserve it." Thursday afternoon, I watched from the living room window as they loaded their matching luggage into Kevin's SUV. They were laughing, excited, looking for all the world like a happy couple on their way to a romantic getaway. They had no idea they were leaving their entire world behind. Be good, Mom. Kevin called as he got into the driver's seat. Don't burn the house down. I won't, I called back. I'll take excellent care of it. The moment their car disappeared around the corner, I sprang into action. My first call was to Mr. Davies. They're gone, I said. It's time. Friday morning at 10 o'clock sharp, I was seated in the conference room at the title company. Across the table sat the Hendersons, the lovely couple who were buying my house. They were bubbling with excitement, talking about the garden they wanted to plant and the nursery they were planning for their first grandchild. They loved the house, truly loved it, and it brought me a profound sense of peace to know it was passing into caring hands. The signing was a blur of papers and signatures. When it was all over, the title agent slid a cashier's check across the table to me. I looked at the number, the final proceeds from the sale, and my hand trembled as I picked it up. It was done. The house was no longer mine. My next call was to the moving company I had secretly booked weeks ago. I'm ready for you tomorrow morning, I said. Saturday was a whirlwind of organized chaos. The movers were efficient and professional. I directed them with a calm I didn't know I possessed. I wasn't taking much. The big furniture, the things Kevin and Brittany saw as their own, I left behind. What was the point? They could deal with the Hendersons about that. I was only taking the things that held my soul. My grandmother's china cabinet. The rocking chair David had made for me when Kevin was born. My books. The boxes of photo albums. And, of course, the heavy metal box containing the proof of my financial independence. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the truck was loaded and gone, on its way to a storage facility near Carmel, where it would wait for my arrival. I spent the last few hours in the house that had been my life for 30 years. It was eerily quiet, the rooms echoing with emptiness. I walked from room to room, my hand trailing along the walls. I didn't feel sad. I had mourned the loss of my home months ago, the day my son told me it wasn't mine anymore. This was just a formality. I remembered what Kevin had said as he left. Don't burn the house down. I smiled. I hadn't burned it down. I had simply sold it. And in less than 24 hours, he and Brittany would return to find not just an empty house, but the smoldering ruins of their carefully constructed plans. All right, this is it. The moment we've all been waiting for. You are not going to want to miss the look on their faces when they walk through that door and realize their whole world has been turned upside down. Stick around. Sunday evening, I sat in the one armchair I'd left behind, a book open on my lap, though I wasn't reading. I was listening. Every car that passed on the street made my heart jump. At 7:15 p.m., headlights swept across the living room wall. They were back. I heard their laughter as they came up the front walk, the sound of their keys jingling. The front door opened. Home sweet home. Brittany trilled. They stepped into the entryway and froze. The cavernous emptiness of the living room hit them first. The rug was gone. The coffee table was gone. The lamps, the paintings, everything. What the? Kevin's duffel bag dropped to the floor with a thud. Mom? What is going on? Where is all the furniture? Brittany's head snapped from side to side, her perfectly tanned face a mask of confusion. Did we get robbed? That was my cue. I calmly stood up from the armchair in the corner and walked toward them. No, dear, I said, my voice even. You weren't robbed. They both stared at me, their eyes wide. Then where is everything? Kevin demanded. I moved it, I said simply, to my new place. Brittany let out a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. Your new place? Don't be ridiculous. Sunset Meadows doesn't move you in on a Sunday night. You're right, they don't, I agreed. I reached into the pocket of my slacks and pulled out 2 envelopes. I handed one to Kevin and one to Brittany. My new place isn't Sunset Meadows. It's a 2-bedroom condo in Carmel by the Sea, California. The silence that followed was so absolute I could hear the house settling. They stared at me as if I'd just sprouted a second head. Then, with trembling fingers, they tore open the envelopes. Inside each was a single sheet of paper. It was a formal letter from Mr. Arthur Davies, attorney at law. I watched their eyes fly across the page. I knew the words by heart. It informed them that, as of Friday at 4 p.m., the property at 123 Maple Lane was no longer my asset. It had been sold to a new owner. It stated that per an agreement with the new owners, Any remaining personal property must be removed within 30 days. Kevin looked up, his face ashen. Sold? What do you mean sold? You can't sell this house. This is my inheritance. An inheritance, I said, my voice as cold and sharp as glass, is something you receive after someone has passed away, Kevin. And as you can see, I am very much alive. Brittany was shaking her head, her face contorting with rage. This is a joke. It has to be a joke. You can't do this. The house is in his name. Was, I corrected her gently. It was in his name under a legal agreement that my lawyer found to be deeply flawed. Turns out, taking advantage of a grieving widow isn't as legally binding as you thought. The reality finally crashed down on them. This wasn't a joke. This was real. But where will we live? Kevin stammered, the words coming out in a choked whisper. And there it was. Not. Mom, are you okay? Not. Why would you do this? But, where will we live? Their first thought was for themselves. It always was. I'm sure you'll figure something out, I said, allowing a thin, cold smile to touch my lips. You're both resourceful young people. Brittany's composure finally shattered. You can't do this to us, she shrieked, the letter crunched in her fist. We had plans. A 5-year plan. The renovations, the baby. You've ruined everything. No, Brittany, I said, my voice rising for the first time, cutting through her hysteria. You ruined everything. You, with your greed and your cruelty. You thought you could throw me away like a piece of old furniture. Did you really think I would just let you? I turned to my son, whose face had crumpled in defeat. And you, I said softly, but with no less venom. You stood by and let it happen. You let her humiliate me in my own home. You chose her over your own mother. Well, now you can have her. I hope she keeps you warm at night. I picked up my small suitcase from beside the door. My flight was in 3 hours. As I pulled the handle up, a thought occurred to me. Oh, and Brittany, I said, turning back one last time. You were wondering where I got the money for all this? You should have paid more attention to David's life insurance policy and his investment portfolio. Turns out he was a very smart, very loving husband. Enjoy your 5-year plan. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I left them there, standing in the ruins of their own greed. The echoes of their shattered future bouncing off the empty walls of a house that was no longer theirs. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I just felt free. The flight to San Francisco was the most peaceful 9 hours of my life. I had a window seat, and as the plane climbed above the clouds, leaving the lights of Cleveland twinkling below, I felt a lifetime of weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't running away from something. I was flying toward everything. I ordered a glass of champagne, and when the flight attendant asked if I was celebrating, I just smiled and said, a new beginning. I had arranged for a car service, and the drive down the Pacific Coast Highway to Carmel was breathtaking. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and purple. The ocean crashed against the rugged cliffs below, a powerful, endless rhythm. This was nothing like the quiet, predictable suburbs I had left behind. This was wild and beautiful and alive. The property manager met me at the condo. Her name was Maria, a warm, smiling woman who handed me the keys with a genuine welcome home. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I had made the right choice. The pictures online hadn't done it justice. The entire western wall was glass, looking out over the vast expanse of the Pacific. The air smelled of salt and eucalyptus. The sound of the waves was a constant, soothing murmur. It was even better than the dream David and I had shared. I spent the first few days in a daze of happy exploration. I walked for miles along the scenic coastal path, watching the sea otters play in the kelp beds. I discovered a tiny bakery that made the most incredible sourdough bread. I found a bookstore with a cozy armchair by a window, where I could sit and read for hours. Slowly I began to meet people. My next-door neighbor, a retired art professor named Sylvia, invited me for a glass of wine on her balcony. I joined a morning yoga class on the beach. I started volunteering at the local library, just as I had in Ohio, and found a community of women who were smart, funny, and fiercely independent. They weren't interested in where I'd come from. They were interested in who I was now. One afternoon, about a month after I arrived, the moving truck carrying my treasured possessions pulled up. As the movers brought in my grandmother's china cabinet and David's rocking chair, the condo truly began to feel like my home. I arranged my photo albums on the shelves and placed a picture of David and me on the mantelpiece. I looked at his smiling face and whispered, "We made it, honey." That evening I sat on my balcony, wrapped in a warm blanket, a cup of tea in my hands. The sky was a brilliant, star-filled canopy. I thought about Kevin and Brittany, a fleeting, distant thought, like a story I'd read about someone else. I wondered where they were, what they were doing. But the thought didn't bring pain or anger, brought nothing at all. They were part of a life that no longer belonged to me. I had spent so many years defining myself as a wife and a mother. Now I was just Eleanor, a woman living in a beautiful place, making new friends, learning to paint with watercolors, and waking up every single day with a sense of peace and possibility. I had thought my life was over when David died. Then I thought it was over when my son betrayed me. But I was wrong. It was just waiting for me to finally claim it as my own. For 3 months, the silence from Ohio was absolute. I didn't call and they didn't call. It was a silent mutual agreement that our old life was over. I sent Aunt Carol postcards and we spoke on the phone weekly, but I made it clear I didn't want to hear about Kevin. I needed the space to heal, to build my new life without the ghosts of the old one. Then one Tuesday morning, as I was enjoying my coffee on the balcony, my phone rang. It was an unknown number with an Ohio area code. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something made me answer. "Hello." There was a pause on the other end, then a hesitant voice I barely recognized. "Mom." It was Kevin. He sounded broken. The arrogance was gone, the entitlement stripped away, leaving only a raw, hollow sound. "Hello, Kevin," I said, my voice neutral. "Mom, thank God," he breathed, and I could hear the crackle of emotion in his voice. I didn't know if you'd answer." "What do you want?" I asked, my heart guarded. He took a shaky breath. I needed to tell you. Brittany left me." I can't say I was surprised. I remained silent, letting him talk. "It was about a month after you left," he stammered. "We were staying with her parents. It was awful. They looked at me with such contempt. We argued constantly. She blamed me for everything. She said I was weak, that I had lost her the lifestyle she deserved. Last week I was served with divorce papers." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "The lifestyle she deserved. The one you paid for, Mom. All those years." I still said nothing. This wasn't about me. This was about him. "I'm living in a small one-bedroom apartment now," he continued, his voice thick with self-pity. "I had to sell my car. I'm drowning in debt. The debt we racked up, thinking we had your house as a safety net." He finally broke down, the sound of a man completely unraveled. It was a raw, painful sob that tore through the peaceful morning air. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he cried. "I was a terrible son. I was a fool. I let her poison my mind, turn me against you. I let her disrespect you in our own home. I threw away the only person who ever truly loved me, and for what? For a woman who left the second the money was gone. I lost everything." I closed my eyes, the sound of the ocean waves a steady counterpoint to my son's despair. The angry, vengeful part of me wanted to say, "You got what you deserved." But as I listened to him, I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt a profound, weary sadness. "I'm not going to say it's okay, Kevin," I said finally, my voice soft but firm. "Because it's not. What you did was not okay." "I know," he whispered. "I forgive you," I said. The words surprised me as much as they probably surprised him. "Not for you, but for me. I can't build a new life here in the sunshine while carrying all that darkness from the past." My anger served its purpose. It gave me the strength to leave. Now it's just a weight, and I'm letting it go. I took a deep breath of the salty air. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean things can go back to the way they were. You are a grown man, and you need to clean up your own mess. You need to build your own life on your own terms without a safety net. There was a long silence on the line. Then he asked a question, his voice small like a little boy's. Is there any chance? For us? To ever talk again?" "There is always a chance, Kevin," I said. "But it has to be different. It has to be built on honesty and respect, not obligation or convenience. The old relationship is over. If we're going to have a new one, we both have to work for it. That phone call was a turning point. Not for us, not yet, but for me. Releasing that final bit of anger felt like unlocking the last chain. My life in Carmel blossomed. I sold my first watercolor painting at a local art fair. My neighbor Sylvia and I took a road trip up the coast to Oregon. I was truly deeply happy. 6 months after that call, I made the decision. I was done renting. This was my home. I contacted a realtor, and after a short search I found it. A perfect little house, a cottage really, with a stone fireplace and a garden overflowing with lavender and roses. It had a small guest room and a wide deck that looked out over the endless blue of the Pacific. I bought it with the money from the sale of my old life. Kevin and I began to talk occasionally. Short, tentative phone calls. He told me he'd gotten a new job, a step down from his old one, but it was a start. He said he was in therapy trying to understand his choices. He never asked me for money again. He was slowly, painfully learning to stand on his own 2 feet. He was growing up finally at the age of 40. Perhaps one day he'll visit. Perhaps he'll sit on my deck and we can watch the sunset together. And perhaps not. Our future is an unwritten page. But I know this. I am not responsible for his happiness anymore. I am only responsible for my own. I'm sitting on that deck now, a glass of wine in my hand, watching the fog roll in over the ocean. I'm 69 years old. I'm a painter. I'm a gardener. I'm a friend. I am not a burden. I am not past my prime. I am a testament to the fact that it is never ever too late to reclaim your life, to demand respect, to choose yourself. They thought they could write the final chapter of my story for me and file it away in a place called Sunset Meadows. But they were wrong. My story wasn't over. It was just getting to the best part. Thank you all so much for listening to my story today. It wasn't easy to share, but I felt it was important. I have a question for all of you watching. Have you ever reached a point in your life where you had to make a radical choice to save your own happiness? Please, share your experience in the comments below. Your stories give strength to us all. And if my journey resonated with you, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. Let's remind each other that we are the authors of our own lives.